The day humans left in silence. Part 1. The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal towers of Nexus Prime, the heart of galactic civilization. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at her office window, watching the endless stream of ships arriving and departing from the massive spaceport below. Beings from 1,000 worlds moved through the busy streets, their different forms creating a colorful parade of galactic unity. Elena smiled as she watched a group of young Althari students following their teacher toward the Human Cultural Center. The blue-skinned children moved with excitement, their tentacles waving as they pointed at the building. Today they would learn about human music and art. Tomorrow, perhaps they would study human engineering or medicine. This was the life Elena loved. For 200 years, humans had been part of the Galactic Council. They had started as the newest members, eager to learn and help. Now they were respected partners in building a better galaxy. "Ambassador, your morning briefing is ready," said Marcus Chen, her chief aide, as he entered the office. Marcus had been with the human delegation for 15 years. His calm voice and quick mind made him perfect for handling the endless stream of requests that came to the human embassy. Elena turned from the window and walked to her desk. The briefing pad showed the day's schedule. 3 peace talks to mediate. A meeting with Corvan scientists who needed help with their failing power grid. A conference call with human medical teams working on 12 different worlds. The Zalathi trade dispute is getting worse, Marcus said, pointing to the first item. Both sides asked for human help again. Elena nodded. The Zalathi were an old and proud species. They had been part of the council for over 1,000 years. Lately they seemed to ask for human help with every problem, even though they sometimes acted unhappy about it. "Schedule a meeting for this afternoon," Elena said. "And make sure we have translators. The Zalathi prefer to speak in their old, formal language when they're upset." The comm system chimed. Elena touched the panel and saw the face of Dr. Sarah Kim, who ran the human medical station on Outer Rim World Gamma 7. "Good morning, Ambassador," Dr. Kim said. Her face looked tired but happy. "I wanted to update you on the plague situation. We found a cure. The local population is completely healthy now." Elena felt warmth in her chest. This was why she loved her job. "That's wonderful news, Sarah. How many lives did we save?" "About 2 million beings across 4 worlds," Dr. Kim replied. "The local governments want to throw a celebration feast in our honor. They're calling us heroes again." After the call ended, Marcus shook his head with amazement. 12 plague outbreaks cured this year. The humans are getting quite a reputation as miracle workers. Elena laughed. "We're not miracle workers. We just don't give up easily. That's what humans do best." The rest of the morning flew by in meetings. Elena met with a Corvan engineering team whose planet's power system was failing. The Corvans were insect-like beings with brilliant technical minds, but they thought in very straight lines. Humans were good at thinking around corners. "The problem is not your power generators," Elena explained to the lead Corvan engineer. "The problem is that you're trying to run them like separate systems. Connect them in a network. Let them share power when one system gets overloaded." The Corvan engineer's compound eyes lit up with understanding. "Ah, like a hive mind but for machines. Why didn't we think of that?" "Because you needed a fresh view," Elena said kindly. "That's what humans bring to the galaxy. We see things differently." At lunch, Elena ate with Captain James Rodriguez, who commanded the human peacekeeping forces on Nexus Prime. James was a big man with kind eyes and a gentle voice that could somehow stop fights just by speaking. "The Korthak military leaders want to meet with you tomorrow," James said between bites of his sandwich. "They're having trouble with those rebels in the outer spiral again." The Korthak were warrior beings who looked like walking tanks. They were brave and honorable, but they solved every problem with force. Humans had taught them that sometimes talking worked better than fighting. "Same rebels as last month?" Elena asked. "Different ones, but same problem. The Korthak want to attack. The rebels want to fight. Everyone wants to die for their cause." James shook his head. "I don't understand why they keep choosing war when peace works so much better." Elena smiled. "Because they haven't learned what we learned on Earth. War is easy. Peace is hard work. But hard work lasts longer." That afternoon brought the Zalathi trade meeting. The Zalathi delegation entered Elena's conference room with their usual formal ceremony. Their tall, pale forms moved with grace, but Elena noticed tension in their body language. "Honored Ambassador," said Counselor Zixith, the lead Zalathi negotiator, "we come seeking human wisdom in this difficult matter. The problem was complex. Two Zalathi colony worlds were fighting over mining rights to an asteroid field. Both sides had legal claims. Both sides were angry. Both sides wanted the humans to solve their problem. Elena spent 2 hours listening to arguments. Then she suggested something simple. Why don't you mine the asteroids together? Share the profits based on how much work each colony does. The Zalathi looked at each other with surprise. Counselor Zixith spoke slowly. Humans always make the complicated simple. We appreciate your help. But Elena noticed something in his voice. Was that appreciation or something else? As the day ended, Elena walked through the human section of Nexus Prime. Human families lived here alongside their alien friends. Human children played with Althari younglings in the parks. Human restaurants served food from a dozen worlds. Human schools taught galactic history and science. The humans had built a good life here. They had made friends across the galaxy. They helped solve problems and prevented wars. They cured diseases and shared their knowledge freely. The galaxy was a better place with humans in it. Elena stopped at a small cafe run by Mrs. Patterson, an elderly human woman who had lived on Nexus Prime for 40 years. Mrs. Patterson served the best coffee in the Galactic District, and beings from every species came to her little shop. The usual ambassador? Mrs. Patterson asked with a smile. Please, Elena said, sitting at her favorite table. Through the window she could see alien children learning to play human games in the street. She could see human doctors heading to their night shifts at the alien hospitals. She could see Korthak warriors and Zalathi scholars eating dinner together at the restaurant across the way. This was peace. This was what they had built together. Mrs. Patterson brought her coffee and sat down across from her. You look thoughtful tonight, dear. Elena sipped her coffee and thought about the day. About the problems solved and the lives saved. About the Zalathi who seemed less grateful each time they asked for help. About the Korthak who sometimes looked annoyed when humans stopped their wars. Mrs. Patterson, Elena said slowly, do you ever worry that we're too helpful? The old woman laughed. Dear, there's no such thing as too helpful. Helping others is what makes us human. It's what makes us special. Elena nodded, but the feeling stayed with her as she walked home. Something was changing in the galaxy. She could feel it in the way some species looked at humans now. Not with gratitude, but with something else. Something that felt like resentment. But surely she was imagining things. The humans had built such good relationships with everyone. They had given so much and asked for so little. They were partners in building a better galaxy. What could possibly go wrong? The day humans left in silence. Part 2. The whispers started small, like drops of poison in a clear stream. Elena first heard them 3 months after her conversation with Mrs. Patterson. She was walking through the council corridors when she passed a group of Zalathi junior diplomats. They spoke in their old language, thinking no human would understand. But Elena had studied Zalathi for years. Always the humans with their solutions, one was saying. As if we cannot solve our own problems. My grandfather says we managed the galaxy just fine for 1,000 years before they arrived, another replied. Now we cannot make a decision without asking the human children for advice. Elena kept walking, pretending she hadn't heard. But the words stuck in her mind like thorns. The next week brought more signs. The Korthak Military Academy had invited human instructors to teach peacekeeping methods for 5 years running. This year, the invitation didn't come. When Elena asked about it, General Thorgrim gave a stiff reply. We have decided to focus on traditional Korthak methods this year, the general said. His warrior's face showed no emotion, but Elena sensed something cold behind his eyes. We thank the humans for their past help, but we must remember our own strength. Captain Rodriguez was disappointed when Elena told him. Those young Korthak officers learned so much about peaceful solutions, he said. Now they'll go back to thinking every problem needs a hammer. Maybe that's what they want, Elena said quietly. The changes were subtle but growing. The Althari stopped sending their brightest students to human universities. The Corvin engineering teams started declining human help with their projects. Even the outer rim worlds began handling their own medical emergencies instead of calling for human aid. At first, Elena thought it was a good sign. The galaxy was becoming more independent. But the pattern worried her. It felt less like confidence and more like rejection. The real shock came during a council session about trade regulations. Elena was presenting a human proposal to reduce shipping costs by sharing cargo space between species. It was a simple idea that could save everyone money and reduce space traffic. Counselor Zixith of the Zalathi stood up slowly. His pale face wore a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "The Council appreciates the human proposal," he said in his formal voice. "However, we must ask, why do humans always assume they know what is best for the galaxy?" Silence fell over the great chamber. Elena felt her heart skip a beat. In 200 years, no council member had ever questioned human motives so directly in open session. "I'm not sure I understand," Elena said carefully. Zixith's smile grew colder. "Humans have become very involved in galactic affairs. Some species wonder if this involvement has grown beyond what is appropriate for such a young council member." Murmurs ran through the chamber. Elena looked around and saw nodding heads among several delegations. The Korthak delegation sat with stone faces. The Althari looked uncomfortable but didn't speak up. Even species that humans had helped many times seemed to be listening with interest. Elena stood up slowly. "Humans have always offered help when asked. We have never forced our solutions on anyone. But you have made yourselves necessary," said a new voice. General Vorthak of the Korthak military caste had risen from his seat. His massive armored form cast a shadow across the chamber. "Every conflict requires human mediators. Every disease needs human doctors. Every problem waits for human solutions. The galaxy has forgotten how to function without you." Elena felt the chamber turning against her. These weren't random complaints. This was organized, planned. "We only help where we're invited," Elena said, trying to keep her voice steady. "If species prefer to handle their own affairs, we respect that choice." "Do you?" Zixith asked. "Or do you make problems seem so complex that only humans can solve them?" The accusation hit like a physical blow. Elena had spent her life helping others, and now they were saying she had trapped them into needing that help. Ambassador Quintar of the Althari finally spoke. His blue tentacles moved nervously as he addressed the chamber. "Perhaps we should remember that humans have saved millions of lives and prevented countless wars." "Yes," General Vorthak replied. "And in doing so, they have made themselves the center of galactic civilization. Every species now looks to Earth before making important decisions. Is this the independence we wanted when we formed the Council?" Elena sat down heavily. Around her she could see human delegation members looking shocked and hurt. Marcus leaned over to whisper, "Ambassador, should we call for a recess?" Elena shook her head. She needed to hear this. She needed to understand what was happening. The debate continued for hours. Speaker after speaker rose to voice concerns about human influence. They spoke of feeling diminished, of losing their own cultural identity, of becoming dependent on human solutions. The words were polite and diplomatic, but the message was clear. Humans had become too important, too central, too necessary. The vegan representative, a tall, insect-like being, put it most directly. "We fear that our children will grow up thinking humans are superior because humans always have the answers. How can we maintain our dignity as equal species when we constantly need human help?" Elena finally understood. It wasn't that humans were bad at helping. It was that they were too good at it. Their success had made other species feel small and useless. Their willingness to solve every problem had created resentment instead of gratitude. When the session ended, Elena walked back to her office in silence. The human delegation followed her, their faces showing confusion and hurt. These were good people who had dedicated their lives to helping others. Now they were being told their help was unwanted. "I don't understand," said Dr. Martinez, the head of Human Medical Services. "We've saved so many lives. We've cured diseases that killed millions. How can they resent that?" Elena sank into her chair and looked out at the city below. The street still showed the same mixture of species walking together, but now she wondered what they really thought about each other. "Because," she said slowly, "we made them feel weak. Every time we solved a problem they couldn't solve, we reminded them that they needed us. Every time we prevented a war or cured a plague, we showed them what they couldn't do themselves." Marcus frowned. "But we never meant to make anyone feel bad. We just wanted to help." "I know," Elena said. "But help can hurt when it makes the person being helped feel helpless." That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She walked through the human district, seeing it with new eyes. The schools where human teachers educated alien children. The hospitals, where human doctors treated alien patients. the research centers where human scientists worked on problems from across the galaxy. It all looked the same, but it felt different now. Instead of seeing cooperation, Elena saw dependency. Instead of seeing friendship, she saw resentment building like pressure in a sealed container. She stopped at Mrs. Patterson's cafe, but it was closed. Through the window, she could see the old woman cleaning tables and preparing for tomorrow. Mrs. Patterson looked up and saw Elena. She opened the door with a smile. "Can't sleep, dear?" Elena stepped inside. The familiar smell of coffee and pastries normally comforted her, but tonight it felt different. "Mrs. Patterson, what if we made a mistake?" "What kind of mistake?" Elena sat down at her usual table. "What if helping everyone was the wrong thing to do? What if we should have let them solve their own problems?" Mrs. Patterson sat across from her and poured 2 cups of coffee from the pot she always kept ready. "Elena, dear, you can't make yourself smaller to make others feel bigger. That's not kindness, that's fear. But they hate us now," Elena said softly. "They think we're controlling them." "Some do," Mrs. Patterson agreed. "But some people will always hate those who help them because being helped reminds them of their weaknesses. That doesn't mean helping is wrong." Elena sipped her coffee and thought about the day's events. The careful words and diplomatic language couldn't hide the growing anger she had seen in the council chamber. The galaxy was turning against humanity, and Elena didn't know how to stop it. "What do we do now?" Elena asked. Mrs. Patterson looked out the window at the quiet street. "We keep being who we are, dear. We keep helping those who want help, and we prepare for the possibility that some people would rather struggle alone than accept kindness from others." Elena nodded, but deep in her heart, she feared it was already too late. The whispers had become voices. The voices would soon become demands. And she had no idea what humanity would do when that day came. The Day Humans Left in Silence, Part 3. The emergency council session was called on a Tuesday morning with only 48 hours' notice. Elena stared at the official message on her comm screen, reading it 3 times to make sure she understood correctly. "Motion for restructuring of human involvement in galactic affairs," the document read. "Emergency vote scheduled for Thursday, 14 OI Standard Time. Attendance mandatory for all council members." Marcus stood behind her chair, reading over her shoulder. "They didn't even try to hide what this is about," he said quietly. Elena's hands shook slightly as she set down the compad. 2 days. They were giving humanity 2 days to prepare for what looked like a trial. "Get me a meeting with the Althari delegation," Elena said, "and the Corvin engineers we helped last month. Maybe the Vegan Agricultural Council too. We need to know who still stands with us." But even as she gave the orders, Elena suspected the answer would disappoint her. The next 36 hours proved her right. The Althari were too busy to meet. The Corvin engineers were in deep planning sessions. The Vegan Agricultural Council sent a polite message saying they preferred to remain neutral in political matters. Only a few smaller species agreed to speak with Elena. The Terrans from the Rim worlds, who had been saved from extinction by human medical teams, promised their support. The Aquatic Collective, whose underwater cities used human engineering, offered to speak for humanity. A handful of others made similar promises. Elena counted the votes as she prepared for the session. Out of 127 council species, humanity could count on maybe 15 votes. Not nearly enough. The Great Council chamber filled quickly on Thursday morning. Elena had never seen so many species represented at once. Delegations that normally skipped routine sessions had sent their senior representatives. The viewing galleries, usually empty except for students and tourists, were packed with beings from across the galaxy. Elena took her seat in the human section. Around her sat the other human representatives: Marcus, Captain Rodriguez, Dr. Martinez, and a dozen others who had dedicated their lives to galactic service. They looked nervous but determined. The session began with Counselor Zixith reading the formal motion. His voice carried clearly through the chamber's advanced sound system, reaching every ear and translator in the Great Hall. The Galactic Council recognizes that human involvement in galactic affairs has grown beyond appropriate limits for a junior council member, he began. Therefore, this body proposes the following restructuring measures. Elena listened with growing horror as Zixith read the list. Human research stations on non-human worlds would be closed within 6 months. Human medical teams would be withdrawn from alien populations. Human peacekeeping forces would be removed from all conflict zones. Humans would lose their voting rights on the Council's Science and Security Committees. Human trade agreements would be reviewed and potentially cancelled. It wasn't expulsion from the council, but it was close. They were stripping away everything that made humanity useful to galactic civilization. General Vorthak rose to support the motion. His massive armored form cast shadows across the chamber as he spoke in his deep, rumbling voice. The Korthak have fought honorable wars for 1,000 years, he said. We have learned strength through struggle and wisdom through pain. But human peacekeepers have softened our young warriors. They speak of negotiation where they should speak of victory. They seek compromise where they should seek honor. The Korthak delegation nodded in unison. Elena felt sick watching beings she had considered friends agree to destroy humanity's place in the galaxy. Ambassador Thixra of the Vegan Collective stood next. Elena had hoped the Vegans might stay neutral, but the insect-like being's words crushed that hope. Human agricultural science has indeed increased food production on many worlds, Thixra clicked in his translated voice, but it has also made our farmers dependent on human seeds, human techniques, human knowledge. Our children no longer know how to grow food using traditional methods. What happens if humans decide to withhold their help? We would starve. More voices joined the chorus. The Aquatic Collective complained that human engineering had made their young builders lazy. The Outer Rim worlds worried that human medical science was making their own healers obsolete. Species after species stood to explain how human help had somehow hurt them. Elena listened to it all in growing amazement. These were the same beings who had begged for human assistance year after year, the same species who had celebrated human achievements and praised human wisdom. Now they spoke as if humanity had forced help upon them at gunpoint. When the accusations finally ended, Elena was given a chance to respond. She walked to the speaker's platform on unsteady legs, looking out at hundreds of alien faces. Some showed hostility. Others looked uncomfortable but determined. A few seemed genuinely sad about what was happening. Honored council members, Elena began. I hear your concerns and I want to address them honestly. She took a deep breath and continued. Humans have never forced our help on anyone. Every research station was built at the request of local governments. Every medical team was invited by the species they helped. Every peacekeeping mission was authorized by this very council. Murmurs ran through the chamber. Elena pressed on. If our help has made you feel dependent, that was never our intention. Humans believe that knowledge should be shared, that problems should be solved together, that no being should suffer when help is available. She looked directly at Counselor Zixith. You say humans have grown too influential, but influence comes from trust. Trust comes from results. We have influenced galactic affairs because our methods work. Elena's voice grew stronger as she continued. You blame us for solving problems you couldn't solve. You resent us for preventing wars you wanted to fight. You hate us for curing diseases that killed your people. But answer me this. Are your worlds better or worse because humans helped them? The chamber fell silent. Elena had asked the question no one wanted to answer honestly. I understand your desire for independence, Elena said more softly. Every species should be proud of their own achievements, but independence doesn't require destroying cooperation. Pride doesn't demand rejecting friendship. She paused, looking around the chamber one more time. If you truly believe the galaxy will be better without human involvement, then vote as your conscience demands. But remember this day when the problems return and the solutions are harder to find. Elena returned to her seat as polite applause echoed through the chamber. It was the kind of clapping people did when they respected someone they were about to destroy. The debate continued for another 2 hours. A few voices spoke for humanity. Ambassador Quintar of the Althari gave a beautiful speech about cooperation and mutual respect. The Terran representative talked about the millions of lives saved by human medicine. The small Rim world delegations pleaded with the council to reconsider, but the larger species had already made their decision. When the vote was finally called, the result was devastating. 89 votes in favor of restructuring, 23 against, 15 abstentions. Elena sat in stunned silence as the numbers appeared on the chamber's display screens. It wasn't even close. The galaxy had rejected humanity by an overwhelming margin. Counselor Zixith returned to the podium to announce the result. The motion passes, he said with satisfaction in his voice. Humans have 6 months to comply with all restructuring requirements. The council appreciates human understanding in this matter. Understanding. Elena almost laughed at the word. What was there to understand? The galaxy had decided it didn't want human help anymore. They had dressed it up in diplomatic language, but the message was clear. Humanity was unwelcome. As the session ended and delegates began filing out, Elena remained in her seat. Around her, the other human representatives sat in shocked silence. Captain Rodriguez stared at his hands. Dr. Martinez wiped tears from her eyes. Marcus just looked empty. "What do we do now?" someone asked. Elena stood up slowly. Through the chamber's great windows, she could see the city of Nexus Prime stretching into the distance. Human buildings stood among alien structures. Human families lived in those buildings. Human children played in those parks. "We pack," Elena said quietly. "We pack and we go home." As the human delegation left the council chamber for the last time, Elena felt something she had never experienced in 40 years of diplomatic service. The complete rejection of everything she had worked to build. The galaxy had spoken. Humanity's age of helping others was over. Whether they liked what came next was no longer humanity's concern. The day humans left in silence. Part 4. The silence began at dawn. Elena stood in her empty office looking out at Nexus Prime for the last time. Her personal belongings were packed in 3 small boxes. 2 centuries of human diplomatic history fit into a single storage crate. The walls that had once displayed awards, treaties, and photos of successful missions were bare. Down in the street, she could see human families loading their belongings into transport vehicles. There were no protests, no angry speeches, no dramatic gestures. The humans moved with quiet efficiency, like professionals completing one final job. Marcus entered with a data pad. "The last transport leaves in 6 hours, he said. "All human personnel have been accounted for. The embassy staff, the research teams, the medical units, the peacekeeping forces. Everyone is going home." Elena nodded. "And the other species? Any requests for meetings? Any attempts to negotiate?" Marcus shook his head. "Nothing official. A few informal messages from species that voted against the restructuring. The Althari sent their regrets. The Terran Rimworlds asked if there was anything they could do. And our answer? We thanked them for their friendship and said we understood the Council's decision." Elena almost smiled. Even in defeat, humans remained polite. The comm system chimed with an incoming call. Elena was surprised to see the face of General Vorthak, the Korthak military leader who had spoken so strongly against humanity in the council session. "Ambassador Vasquez," the general said in his deep voice. His armored face showed no emotion. "I wanted to speak with you before your departure." "Of course, General. What can I do for you?" Vorthak paused, and Elena sensed something unusual in his manner. The proud warrior seemed almost uncertain. "There is a situation developing in the outer spiral," he said slowly. "The rebel forces we discussed previously have grown bolder. They have attacked 3 Korthak colonies in the past week." Elena waited for him to continue. "My commanders want to launch a full military response," Vorthak continued. "Crush the rebels. Completely. Show strength to prevent future uprisings. That is the traditional Korthak way," Elena said neutrally. "Yes, but—" Vorthak hesitated again. "Your peacekeepers suggested a different approach last year. Negotiations, addressing rebel grievances, finding political solutions." Elena understood what he wasn't saying. The Korthak military was facing a problem that force alone couldn't solve, and they no longer had access to human advice. "I'm sure you'll find the right solution, General," Elena said diplomatically. "The Korthak are an honorable and capable people." Vorthak's eyes showed frustration. He was asking for help without asking for help, but Elena couldn't give it anymore, even if she wanted to. "Yes," Vorthak said finally. "We are capable. We will handle this ourselves." The call ended, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts. It had begun already. Problems that humans might have helped solve were now purely alien concerns. Throughout the day, similar calls came in. Dr. Yintar of the Outer Rim Medical Council wanted to wish the humans well, while mentioning a new plague outbreak that was spreading faster than expected. Engineer Zoxoth of the Corvin shipyards called to say goodbye, while noting that their new power grid was having unexpected failures. Each caller followed the same pattern, official well-wishes, hiding desperate hints that human help was still needed. But none of them could ask directly. That would mean admitting the council had made a mistake. Elena answered each call with the same polite responses. She thanked them for their friendship, wished them success with their challenges, and offered no assistance. By evening, the human district was nearly empty. The schools had been closed and their equipment shipped back to Earth. The medical centers had transferred their patients to alien hospitals and destroyed their remaining supplies rather than leave them behind. The research stations had encrypted their data and shut down their experiments. Elena walked through the empty streets one final time. Mrs. Patterson's cafe was dark, its windows covered with shipping material. The playground where human and alien children had played together sat silent. The cultural center where humans had shared their art and music with the galaxy stood locked and abandoned. At the spaceport, Elena found the last group of humans preparing to leave. Captain Rodriguez was overseeing the departure of his peacekeeping forces. His soldiers moved with military precision, but Elena could see sadness in their faces. "Any final orders from the council?" Rodriguez asked. "None," Elena replied. "As far as they're concerned, we're already gone." The captain nodded grimly. "My people are taking this hard. They believed in what we were doing here, preventing wars, protecting civilians, keeping the peace. Now they feel like the galaxy just told them their service meant nothing." Elena understood. She felt the same way. Dr. Martinez approached with her medical team. The doctor's eyes were red from crying, but her voice was steady. "The Outer Rim hospitals are asking if we can leave some supplies behind. They don't have enough equipment to handle the current patient load." Elena shook her head. "Council orders were clear. All human resources leave with us. No exceptions." Dr. Martinez's face crumpled slightly. "There are people who will die without those supplies. Then the council should have considered that before they voted us out," Elena said more harshly than she intended. The words surprised even her. Elena had spent her career putting galactic needs before human feelings. But something had changed in the past 3 days. Something had hardened inside her. The last transport ship sat on the landing pad, its cargo holds filled with the remains of humanity's galactic presence. Elena climbed aboard with the final group of evacuees and found a seat near a window. The ship lifted off. Elena watched Nexus Prime shrink below them. The crystal towers still gleamed in the setting sun. The traffic still flowed through the busy streets. The great council building still dominated the city center. Everything looked the same, but Elena knew it was different. The humans were gone. For the first time in 200 years, the galaxy would have to solve its problems without human help. Marcus sat beside her as they reached orbit. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. Elena thought about the question as stars appeared outside their window. Did she regret the years of service? The lives saved? The wars prevented? The knowledge shared? "No," she said finally. "We did good work. We helped people who needed help. We made the galaxy a better place. But they threw us out anyway." Elena nodded. "They threw us out anyway. But that doesn't change what we accomplished. It just changes what happens next." The transport ship turned toward the hyperspace jump point that would take them back to Earth. Behind them, Nexus Prime continued its rotation, carrying the galaxy's capital into night. Elena closed her eyes and tried to sleep. Tomorrow she would have to explain to Earth's government why humanity was withdrawing from galactic affairs. She would have to justify abandoning 2 centuries of careful relationship building. She would have to convince her own people that isolation was better than rejection. But tonight, she just wanted to forget the hurt and confusion she had seen in alien eyes as the humans packed their belongings and left without argument. They had expected anger, demands for reconsideration, threats of retaliation. Instead, they got silence, professional, dignified, complete silence. Elena suspected that silence would prove more unsettling than any angry words could have been. Time would tell if she was right. The day humans left in silence. Part 5. 6 months after the human departure, Counselor Zixith stood alone in the great council chamber, staring at the empty seats where the human delegation had once sat. The chamber was quiet now. Too quiet. When the humans had been present, there was always activity around their section. Beings coming for advice, junior diplomats seeking guidance, committees forming to work on solutions. The human area had buzzed with the kind of productive energy that made things happen. Now those seats gathered dust. Zixith walked slowly around the chamber, his pale Zalathi features reflecting in the polished floor. The morning's council session had ended early again. There hadn't been enough functional committees to conduct normal business. Too many ongoing crises, not enough solutions. His communication device chimed. Another emergency message. Zixith read it with growing dread. The Korthak rebel conflict in the outer spiral had exploded into full war. General Vorthak's forces had attacked the rebel strongholds as planned, but instead of crushing the uprising, they had made it worse. 3 more systems had joined the rebellion. Civilian casualties were mounting. Refugee ships fled toward Council, space, but there were no human medical teams to treat the wounded, no human peacekeepers to protect the innocent. Zixith deleted the message and moved to the next one. The plague outbreak in the Rim worlds was spreading to a dozen systems. Without human medical expertise, local doctors were helpless. Entire planets were under quarantine, their populations dying while alien physicians struggled with diseases they didn't understand. Another message. The Corvin power grid had failed completely. Their homeworld was without energy for the 3rd time this month. The brilliant insect engineers couldn't solve problems that human advisors had once fixed in hours. Zixith sat heavily in his delegate chair and rubbed his temples. Every day brought new disasters. Every week brought fresh proof that the galaxy was falling apart without human involvement. The chamber doors opened, and General Vorthak entered. The massive Korthak warrior looked smaller somehow, his armored shoulders slumped with exhaustion. Behind him came several other council members, all wearing the same defeated expression. "Councillor Zixith," Vorthak said in his deep voice, "we need to talk." The small group gathered around Zixith's seat. Ambassador Quintar of the Althari spoke first, his blue tentacles moving nervously. "The situation in my home system is getting worse," Quintar said. "Our young people are rioting in the streets. They say we were wrong to send away the humans. They blame us for the problems we're facing now." General Vorthak nodded grimly. "My warriors are dying in battles that should never have been fought. The rebels use tactics my soldiers cannot counter. Human peacekeepers would have ended this war before it started, but I was too proud to admit we needed their help." Engineer Zoxoth clicked his mandibles in distress. "Our homeworld has no power for the 4th time this month. Our people freeze in the dark while our greatest engineers scratch their heads in confusion. Problems that humans solved with a few, questions we cannot solve with all our knowledge." Zixith looked around the group and saw his own regret reflected in every face. These were the beings who had led the vote against humanity. Now they were paying the price for their decision. "What do you want me to do?" Zixith asked, though he already knew the answer. "Contact them," Vorthak said bluntly. "Ask them to come back. Tell them we made a mistake." Zixith almost laughed, but there was no humor in the situation. "And what makes you think they'll listen? We told them their help was unwanted. We voted to strip away everything they had built. We treated them like colonizers instead of partners." "But people are dying," Dr. Yintar said, joining the conversation. The medical officer's normally calm voice cracked with emotion. "Millions of beings across dozens of worlds. The humans saved lives. They prevented suffering. Surely they won't ignore humanitarian crises out of spite." Zixith pulled up the communication logs on his personal device. The screen showed hundreds of messages sent to human space over the past 6 months. Desperate pleas for help, formal requests for consultation, even direct appeals from dying patients. Every message had received the same response. An automated reply thanking the sender for their communication and informing them that humanity had withdrawn from galactic affairs indefinitely per council directive. "They're not ignoring us out of spite," Zixith said quietly. "They're respecting our decision. We told them we didn't want their involvement in galactic affairs. They're giving us exactly what we asked for." The group fell silent. Outside the Eye Chamber's great windows, Nexus Prime continued its daily business, but the city felt different now. Less vibrant, less hopeful. The human district remained empty, its buildings housing refugees from the various crises spreading across the galaxy. Ambassador Thixra of the Vegan Collective entered the chamber, her insect features showing unusual agitation. "The agricultural crisis is spreading," she announced without preamble. 6 more worlds have reported crop failures. Our traditional farming methods cannot handle the diseases that human-modified crops prevented. Billions face starvation within the year. She looked directly at Zixith. "My people demand to know why we rejected the beings who fed the galaxy. What do I tell them?" Zixith had no answer. How could he explain that they had feared human influence more than human absence? How could he justify destroying the system that had brought peace and prosperity to countless worlds? "I've been studying the records," Engineer Zoxoth said suddenly, looking back at the past 2 centuries of human involvement. "Do you know what I found?" The others waited for him to continue. They never took credit, Zoxoth said. Every solution they provided, every problem they solved, every war they prevented, the humans always made it seem like the local species had done the work. They were advisors, not rulers, consultants, not dictators. Vorthak's scarred face showed understanding. They made us feel capable even when we were helpless. They let us keep our dignity while they solved our problems. And we repaid them by questioning their motives and casting them out, Quintar added bitterly. Zixith stood up and walked to the human section of the chamber. The empty seat seemed to mock him. He had orchestrated humanity's removal, convinced that the galaxy would be stronger without their influence. Instead, galactic civilization was crumbling without their support. There's something else, Doctor, Yintar said softly. I've been monitoring communications from human space. They're not sitting idle. They're advancing their technology, improving their society, exploring new systems. They're thriving without us. The words hit like a physical blow. While the galaxy descended into chaos, humanity was moving forward. They had accepted rejection with dignity and focused on their own development. Zixith pulled up the long-range sensors data on his screen. The readings from human space showed massive construction projects, new research stations, expanding colonies. Humanity wasn't waiting for the galaxy to change its mind. They were building their own future. What if they don't want us back? Quintar asked the question everyone was thinking. What if they've decided they're better off without galactic civilization? The chamber fell silent again. It was a possibility none of them had considered. They had assumed humans would always be available to help, would always welcome the chance to solve galactic problems. But what if 6 months of silence had changed humanity's perspective? General Vorthak spoke slowly. Then we face the consequences of our actions. We live in the galaxy we created when we rejected their friendship. Zixith looked around the chamber one more time. The empty human seats, the struggling delegations, the crisis reports piling up on every screen. This was their legacy. This was what they had chosen when they let fear overcome gratitude. I'll try one more time, Zixith said finally. A personal message, not an official council communication. I'll apologize, I'll beg if necessary. But I don't think they'll respond. He walked to the communication station and began composing a message to Earth. As he typed, he thought about Elena Vasquez, the human ambassador he had helped drive away. She had offered friendship, and he had responded with suspicion. She had provided solutions, and he had questioned her motives. She had built bridges, and he had burned them. The message was simple. We were wrong. The galaxy is dying without you. Please come back. Zixith sent the message into the void, knowing it would likely join hundreds of others in automated rejection. Then he sat back down in his chair and waited for another crisis report to arrive. Outside the chamber windows, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the petty failures of galactic civilization. Somewhere among those stars, humanity continued its journey without them. And in the great council chamber, empty seats stood as monuments to the price of pride and the cost of taking friendship for granted. The silence stretched on, broken only by the soft chiming of emergency alerts that no one knew how to answer.